It was nearly dusk when I turned off the cracked main road and onto the narrow gravel path that led to our family home. The trees on either side leaned in like silent witnesses, their branches clawing at the windshield as if trying to stop me. Every turn of the tires kicked up gray dust that clung to the car like ash. I hadn't been back to Verlith Hollow in over 8 years. And even now, as I approached the old house, I felt something tighten in my chest, a sense that I wasn't just returning to a home, but stepping back into something that had been waiting for me. Our mother was dead. That should have been enough of a reason to leave after the funeral. But Isolde, she wasn't doing well. The town doctor said she wasn't sleeping, that she was seeing things, saying things, the kind of things that made neighbors cross themselves when she passed by. She had begged me to come. And when your only living sibling says she's hearing Mom's voice through the walls, you don't hang up the phone. The house appeared suddenly between the trees, cold, gray, and too tall. 3 stories of rotting wood, faded shutters, and crooked chimneys. It leaned to the left like it was tired of standing. Every window was dark, except one on the 3rd floor. A flicker of movement behind the curtains made me stop and stare. But when I blinked, it was gone. I parked the car, grabbed my bag, and stepped onto the gravel. The air was thick here. Still. The kind of silence that presses against your skin and makes you feel watched. I hesitated before knocking. Then I remembered, I had a key. My hand shook slightly as I slid it into the lock. The door creaked open before I turned it. Isolde stood there barefoot, her long black hair tangled, her eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in days. She wore one of Mom's old sweaters, the one with the stitched lavender on the sleeves. It hung off her like a memory stretched thin. "You came," she whispered. I nodded. Of course I did. She stepped aside and I walked in. The smell hit me first, dust, old wood, and something else. Something faint and sour, like wilted flowers left too long in water. Nothing had changed. The same oil portraits lined the walls. The same ticking grandfather clock stood in the corner, still broken, still frozen at 2:59. "Why's the power out?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Isolde closed the door behind me. "It's not. It just doesn't stay on after dark anymore." She said it like it was normal, like the house made its own rules now. I glanced at the painting of our great-grandfather above the fireplace. His eyes seemed darker than I remembered. We sat in the kitchen, lit by a single candle. I noticed scratches on the table, deep, uneven grooves carved into the wood. Fresh. "Who did that?" She looked at me blankly. "I don't know. Maybe Mom." I stared at her. "She talks to me, Bernie. At night. Through the vents." I leaned forward. "Isolde. Mom's gone." She smiled faintly. "No. She's not. Not all the way." I wanted to argue, to say something that would pull her back into reality. But then a cold draft slid across the room, and the candle flickered violently. From somewhere deep in the house, something groaned. A low, wooden moan, like a door shifting in its frame. My skin prickled. Isolde didn't flinch. "She said you'd come tonight. She said it had to be tonight." I looked at her closely. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. "What did you open, Isolde?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She looked past me, toward the dark hallway. "A door," she said. "But I think it was the wrong one." And somewhere upstairs, the broken clock ticked once. Just once. After 8 silent years. That was when I knew something had come home with me. And it wasn't just grief. It was waiting, watching, listening. And whatever door she had opened, it wasn't finished yet. I woke up again at 2:59 a.m. Not because of a bad dream. Not because of some noise outside. I just woke up, like something nudged me awake from the inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made your ears ring. The old wood creaked under me as I swung my legs off the bed. The floor felt colder than it should, like the house had forgotten it was supposed to be warm. I checked my phone. No signal. Again. Just that blinking time. 2:59. I rubbed my face and stood. Maybe a drink would help me fall back asleep. Or maybe I just needed to check on Isolde. She'd been talking in her sleep lately. Whispering things. Sometimes I thought I heard her crying. Other times laughing. I walked down the hallway, past the old paintings of our family. Their eyes always felt like they were watching, especially at night. I paused in front of our mother's portrait. Her painted smile looked thinner in the dark. The clock at the end of the hallway ticked once. A loud, sharp tick that made me flinch. Then silence again. I turned toward Isolde's room and froze. Someone was whispering. It was faint, like wind through broken glass. But it was there. Words I couldn't understand. a voice too soft to follow, but too steady to ignore. I moved closer to her door and pressed my ear to it. The whispering stopped. "Isolde," I whispered. No answer. I knocked softly. "You awake?" Still nothing. I tried the handle, it was unlocked. The door opened with a low creak. Isolde sat in the middle of the room. Her back to me, legs crossed. Candles surrounded her in a perfect circle. Every single one was burning low, the flames leaning in one direction, as if drawn to something I couldn't see. She didn't turn around, didn't even flinch. My heart started thudding in my chest. "Isolde." Her head tilted, just slightly. Then I heard it again. A whisper. But not from her. From the vent above her bed. I stared at it. A simple metal grate, the kind that rattled in winter when the heat kicked in. But there was no heat. No air. No sound. Except that whisper. My breath caught in my throat. It was saying my name. Bernardo. Clear as a bell. Soft as a sigh. "Did you hear that?" I asked, barely able to speak. Isolde finally turned her head toward me. Her eyes were wide. Dark circles beneath them like bruises. She looked tired but calm. "They're trying to talk to us," she said. "You just have to listen the right way. ISO, this isn't safe." She smiled. It was the kind of smile you give someone who just doesn't understand. "The veil hour is real," she said. I waited for it, and now I can hear her. I stepped inside and grabbed her shoulders. "You need to stop this. Whatever this is. It's not Mom. You don't know who, what, you're listening to." She shook her head. "It is her. I can feel it. She told me things only she would know." "That could be in your head." "Then why did you wake up too?" she asked, staring at me now. "Why are you hearing it too?" I didn't have an answer. My hands dropped to my sides. The candles flickered. And then, just as the clock struck 3 o'clock, every flame went out at once. The room plunged into darkness. Isolde whispered, "She's gone now." And somewhere behind the vent, something laughed. It was low. It was distant. But it wasn't my mother. I first saw him standing at our front gate. It was just afternoon. The fog hadn't lifted all morning, clinging to the trees like spiderwebs. I was in the living room, trying to get the fireplace going. Our central heating was useless, and caught movement from the corner of my eye through the stained front window. A man in a black overcoat stood perfectly still at the gate. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't waving. He was just watching the house. I don't know how long he had been there. At first, I thought he might be one of the locals, maybe someone checking in about the funeral. But there was something about the way he stood, too upright, too quiet, that set off an old, forgotten instinct in me. The kind of unease you can't explain. Like knowing a shadow doesn't belong where it's standing. I opened the door. He stepped forward with a calm, practiced smile. "Good afternoon. I'm Roderick Dern. I believe your sister asked for help." His voice was smooth, gentle, but cold like the air after a snowstorm. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. No warmth in them at all. I narrowed my eyes. "Help with what, exactly?" He didn't flinch. Just reached into his coat and pulled out a small, dark blue leather card case. Inside was a single cream-colored card with embossed gold lettering. Roderick Dern, Grief Counseling Services. Specializing in transitional reconnection therapy. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but we didn't call for a counselor." He tilted his head. "She requested my services through the old channel." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't like that I didn't know. Before I could say anything else, I heard footsteps behind me. Isolde's voice was soft, almost dazed. "Let him in, Bernardo." I turned. She was standing halfway down the staircase, her eyes locked on Roderick's face. Her skin looked pale, her hair unbrushed, her nightgown slightly wrinkled. But she was smiling. Genuinely. It had been weeks since I'd seen her smile like that. "You know this guy?" I asked. "I think so," she whispered. "I dreamed about him." Roderick didn't blink. The dead whisper. Some of us are better listeners. I hesitated. Every inch of my skin told me to shut the door. But Isolde came closer, hand resting gently on my arm. "Please, just for a few minutes," she said. "He might be able to help." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He walked in like he'd been here before. He didn't ask where to sit. He went straight to the old armchair near the fireplace, our mother's favorite, and sat down slowly, folding his hands in his lap. The smell of cold earth drifted off his coat. Not mud, not mold. Just earth, freshly turned. Isolde joined him, sitting cross-legged on the rug like a child. She looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. My sister, who hadn't left the house in days, who barely spoke to me, was hanging on this stranger's every word. Roderick opened a small black notebook and spoke gently. When did the dream start? Isolde leaned forward. A few nights after Mom died. I kept hearing her voice at the foot of my bed. Then I saw her. I think she's trying to come back. Roderick nodded slowly. They often do. When the connection is strong, death is not a barrier. It's a hallway. I stepped forward, unable to hold back. Hold on, what exactly are you? A therapist? A psychic? Roderick looked at me with a patient smile. I offer peace. And sometimes reunion. You sound like a fraud. He chuckled softly. Skepticism is natural. But your mother, she had faith. Deep faith. So does your sister. It's enough. He reached into his coat and pulled out a book. It looked ancient, leather-bound, with a faded symbol on the cover that looked like an open eye wrapped in thorns. Roderick handed it to Isolde. This will help you navigate the veil. But remember, once you open the door, you must be ready to face what walks through. I felt cold all over. What is this? I asked. Roderick stood. Instructions. Traditions. Echoes passed down through generations. Not everything in there is safe. But grief rarely is. He turned to the door without another word, as if his time had simply run out. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. I'll return on the next veil hour. And just like that, he was gone. The air felt heavier after he left, like the house was holding its breath. Isolde clutched the book to her chest. I stood frozen, watching the fog reclaim the gate. Something deep in me whispered, we just let something in. And it wasn't leaving. Not easily. It started just after 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Again. The old pipes in the walls groaned like they were aching from memory, and the wind outside kept brushing against the windows like fingers too weak to break in. The house had always been strange, even when we were kids. But after Mom died, it felt like it had finally exhaled something it had been holding in for years. I lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling when I heard it. Whispers. Soft, muffled, like someone speaking through a thick sheet of fabric. At first I thought it was the wind again. Then I realized it was coming from Isolde's room. I got up, crept down the hall barefoot, each floorboard groaning louder than the last. Her door was slightly open, and a dim orange light flickered from inside, candlelight. I peeked in. Isolde sat on the floor, cross-legged, in her pale blue nightgown. Candles circled her in a perfect ring, each flame flickering even though there was no draft. In front of her was that awful book Roderick gave her, its pages splayed open, ink glistening like it was still wet. Her eyes were closed. She was whispering. I froze in the doorway. She wasn't praying. I recognized the names. Marielle Vess, Leona Vess, Margaret Vess, Amelia Vess. Those were the names etched into the headstones in the family plot out back. I'd helped clean the moss off them when we buried Mom. Then she said it. Celeste Vess. Mother. And the candle flames surged, just for a second, like something had leaned close to every single wick and inhaled at once. I stepped inside. Isolde. She didn't open her eyes. Isolde, what are you doing? Her mouth stopped moving. The room went quiet. She opened her eyes and stared at me like I'd walked into her dream and pulled her out too fast. Why did you interrupt? She asked, voice low, tired. Because you're chanting dead names at 3 a.m. like you're auditioning for a possession. What do you mean, why? She blinked, then looked down at the open book. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced a line across the page. She answered me, Bernardo, she said. I asked her to come, and she answered. I felt a chill go down my spine. You're sleep-deprived, I said. This place messes with your head. I'm not imagining things. She was here, she whispered. She spoke to me. Her voice came from the mirror. I turned and looked. The full-length mirror in the corner was fogged, like someone had leaned in from the inside and breathed. I didn't know what to say. I stepped closer, reaching out to touch the glass. The fog hadn't come from us. The room was cold. My fingers brushed the surface, and for the briefest moment, it felt warm. Isolde closed the book with a snap and began blowing out the candles one by one. We're not doing this again, I said, more to myself than to her. She looked at me with hollow eyes. It's too late. She's listening now. The final candle went out. The room was swallowed in darkness. And somewhere in that thick silence, I thought I heard a faint knock from behind the mirror. The house had always creaked. The floorboards whispered with every step, and the walls moaned like old men. I told myself it was just age, just the bones of a tired house groaning through another night. But tonight felt different. The creaks were closer, louder, like something pacing beneath the floor. I sat up in bed, listening. It was just past 3 a.m. Veil hour, as Isolde called it. I never believed in that nonsense, but something deep inside me, it stirred tonight. Something old. Something cold. I got out of bed and walked barefoot across the wooden floor. Each step thudded like a warning. I grabbed my flashlight from the desk drawer and made my way down the narrow staircase. The air thickened the lower I went. It smelled of rust and mold, like old water and forgotten time. The basement door was shut, but I noticed something new. Scratches. Deep, crooked gouges ran along the frame, like claws had raked against it. I reached out and touched them, expecting paint to peel under my fingers. But no, it was gouged wood, splintered and raw. I hesitated. Grandmother always said never go into the basement at night. She used to lock the door, even when the rest of the house was wide open. I used to think she was just being strange. Now I wasn't so sure. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. I opened the door. The hinges shrieked like something dying. Cold air rushed out, brushing against my face like icy fingers. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step groaning louder than the last. My flashlight flickered, but I smacked it once, and it held. The basement was bigger than I remembered. Stone walls surrounded me, their surfaces crawling with black veins of damp rot. The shelves were lined with mason jars full of unrecognizable things, bones, maybe, or dried plants that looked like they had been dead for decades. Then I saw it. Carvings. Symbols marked the back wall. Circles inside triangles, slashed eyes, and crooked runes I couldn't read. They looked burned into the stone, not carved. Old. Ancient. Some were drawn in what looked like ink. Others. I hoped it was rust. I stepped closer and noticed something beneath the symbols. A piece of parchment, yellowed and curled at the edges, nailed to the wall. I pulled it free, gently, careful not to rip it. It was a letter. The handwriting was tight and rushed. If you're reading this, you're already too close. Don't speak her name down here. Don't follow her voice. And above all, don't let the door open again. M. Vess. I didn't breathe. My heart pounded so loud I swore something else could hear it. I turned to leave. Then I saw it. A door. It had no handle. No hinges. Just a tall, narrow rectangle in the far wall, covered in carvings identical to the ones above. Something about it felt alive. The air in front of it shimmered like heat on asphalt. I didn't want to touch it, but I couldn't help myself. As I stepped closer, my flashlight dimmed. Whispers filled the air. Soft. Guttural. Foreign. And yet, one voice among them was familiar. My mother. She was saying my name. Bernardo. I froze. My hands trembled as I backed away. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. Something on the other side was already waiting. Watching. And it knew I was there. I ran. Up the stairs. Through the creaking hall. I slammed the basement door shut and shoved a chair beneath the knob. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the hallway outside Isolde's room, listening to her breathe, trying to convince myself I hadn't just heard our dead mother whispering through stone. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't call us from heaven. She was calling us from somewhere else. I couldn't sleep. Not because of the storm rattling the windows, or the hollow thumps echoing through the attic at odd hours. Those had become normal. It was because of Isolde. She had changed. And I don't mean the small changes grief brings, like a distant gaze or sleeping in too much. No, this was deeper. Stranger. It started 3 nights ago. I walked past her room and found the door slightly open. A flickering candle sat on her desk, casting tall shadows on the walls. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, whispering to someone or something. Her voice was soft, childlike. I couldn't make out the words. She had their mother's red scarf draped around her shoulders like a cloak. That was strange enough. But what chilled me was what I saw next. She was holding our mother's old locket in both hands, pressing it to her forehead, eyes rolled back, mouth moving fast like she was speaking in tongues. I stepped back. The floor creaked. She stopped. Bernardo, she said without turning her head. I didn't answer. I walked away. Fast. The next morning, she was humming. She never hummed. Isolde made pancakes, called me sweetheart, and asked if I wanted to go pick apples. I stared at her. She looked healthy. Her skin had more color. Her eyes were brighter. But something in that smile, something in the way she moved, was off. Like she was playing a role. Or like something was watching through her. That night, I sat outside her door and listened. At exactly 2:59 a.m., I heard a second voice. Not hers. It was low. like someone talking through broken glass. Then came laughter. Wet, sticky laughter that didn't belong in this house, or any house. I burst in. The candle was lit again. Her mother's scarf was now wrapped around a wooden figure, a doll made of hair and cloth. The air smelled like burnt sugar and mold. Isolde sat cross-legged calm, smiling up at me. She told me your secret, she said. I didn't ask what. I couldn't. I grabbed the book Roderick gave her and stormed out. I locked myself in my room, turned on every light, and flipped through the pages. It was worse than I thought. The book wasn't just about seances or spirits. It was a guide to anchor a presence, a permanent tether between this world and whatever was speaking back. And the steps. First, grief. Second, calling. Third, invitation. Fourth, sacrifice. Isolde was already on step 3. I didn't know what the sacrifice would be, or who. But I knew one thing. Roderick wasn't helping her move on. He was preparing her. Using her. That morning, I made coffee and tried to talk to her again. Where did you go last night? I asked. She looked at me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I was home, she said. Did you hear Mom? She asked about you. I tried not to flinch. Isolde, that's not Mom. I don't know what that thing is, but it's not her. She tilted her head. Why are you so afraid of hope? It's not hope if it opens the wrong door. Her smile faded. Then maybe, she said, voice cold, you should stop standing in the way. That night, I found more strange things. Old bones wrapped in cloth behind the furnace, a circle of black salt around her bed, mirrors covered in red thread. My sister was sinking deeper into something she didn't understand. Or maybe she did. And that's what scared me most. Because the thing she thought was our mother, it was getting stronger. And it wanted her all to itself. I couldn't sleep that night. Not just because of the noise, though the tapping from inside the walls had returned, but because of something worse, silence. Isolde had stopped talking to me completely. Her eyes no longer looked like hers. She stared at nothing, or sometimes at corners of the room like something was there. She moved like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. I had to know what was happening. I had to dig. So the next morning, I left the house and went straight to the old town library, a crumbling brick building that smelled like wet paper and forgotten time. I used to come here with Mom when I was a kid. Back then it felt warm. Now it felt like a mausoleum. Behind the desk was Mrs. Halpern, the town's forever librarian. She looked up at me, her glasses hanging low on her nose. You're a Vess, she said softly. I gave her a tight nod. Looking for anything on my family. Specifically Desmond Vess. She didn't move at first. Her eyes sharpened, but her lips stayed flat. There's not much written down, she finally said. But there's always whispers. What are you trying to find? Truth, I said. She held my gaze for a long time, then slowly got up and disappeared into a room behind the desk. A minute later, she came back with a small box. She slid it toward me like it was something cursed. Inside were yellowed papers, old photographs, and clippings from newspapers that hadn't been printed in decades. I took it to a back table and started sorting through it. That's when the story started piecing itself together. Desmond Vess, my great-great-grandfather, had been a spiritualist in the 1890s. At first, people loved him. He helped find lost children, predicted floods, even claimed to speak with the dead. But then the disappearances started. People close to him, servants, neighbors, even a priest, vanished without a trace. And then there was the house. My house. One article called it the Devil's Ledger, because Desmond had scrawled pages and pages of demonic sigils in the basement walls. Another clipping quoted a dying man who claimed he saw Desmond open a door in the floor, and something came out. But the photo that chilled me to my core was the one tucked at the bottom. It showed Desmond Vess, standing proudly in front of the house. Next to him was a man in a black suit. He was tall, smiling, and had his hand on Desmond's shoulder like a proud father. Roderick Dern. The exact same face. No difference. Not older. Not younger. The same eyes. Same smile. A century ago. It couldn't be possible. And yet, there it was. I felt sick. Like my stomach had been pulled down through the chair. I slammed the box shut and walked out into the daylight, but the cold didn't leave me. I knew then that Isolde wasn't just playing with some innocent ritual. She was repeating history. Our family's history. And Roderick Dern, no Rodri, had been waiting all this time for another Vess to open the door. That night, I stared at the basement again. I didn't go down. I couldn't. Not yet. But I knew I would have to. Because whatever my sister was opening, it wasn't meant to be opened. And whatever Rodri really was, he'd been feeding on Vest's blood for over 100 years. And now it was Isolde's turn. Unless I stopped it. The night Isolde told me about the ritual, her eyes burned with a strange fire I had never seen before. She said it was the final step to bring Mother back, that nothing could stop her now. I wanted to laugh it off, call it another one of her fragile hopes, but the way she spoke made my blood run cold. There was no doubt. She believed every word. I found her in the dim light of the parlor, sitting cross-legged on the floor with that ancient book open before her, the one Rodri gave her. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with twisted symbols and strange instructions. She traced her finger over the words, whispering them as if they were a prayer. "You don't understand, Bernardo," she said without looking up. "This isn't just a seance anymore. This is the real crossing. I have to open the door the right way this time." I swallowed hard, feeling a pit grow in my stomach. "Isolde, you don't know what you're messing with. Rodri, he's not helping you. He's using you." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Rodri understands grief. He understands pain. He's the only one who can help me. You just want to keep me locked in fear." "Fear? No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm trying to protect you." She looked at me then, eyes wide and desperate. "I don't want protection. I want to see her again. To hear her voice, to hold her." The room felt colder. The shadows seemed to stretch and curl around her, thickening like smoke. I fought the urge to back away, to run from the darkness gathering in that fragile place between hope and madness. Later, alone in the basement, I found what I had been afraid to see. The walls were carved with those same symbols from the book, deep, jagged scratches forming a terrible pattern. I brushed dust from an old letter pinned beneath a rusted nail. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Do not let the door open again. The veil must stay closed, or worse will follow." I thought of Mother, of the silence left behind, and my sister caught between worlds. This was not a ritual to bring her back. It was a door to something else, something hungry, waiting for us to slip. I wanted to warn Isolde, to make her stop, but the knot in my throat tightened. How do you fight a darkness that wears the face of your own sorrow? The moment the old grandfather clock struck 2:59 a.m., I knew something was wrong. The air inside the house had changed. It was thicker, heavy like wet wool wrapped around my lungs. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air was pressing back. Every light in the house flickered, casting long shadows that twisted like they were trying to break free from the walls. The scent of burned wood and something rotten filled my nose. I knew Isolde had begun the ritual. I ran down the hallway, my feet echoing on the creaking floorboards. Her room was dark, but there was a faint red glow slipping out from beneath the door, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Isolde!" I shouted, banging on the door. "Open it! Stop this!" No answer. I threw my weight against the door. It groaned and cracked, then swung open so suddenly I stumbled inside. She was kneeling on the floor in the center of a chalk-drawn circle, candles burning at each point of the pentagram. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were moving in a whisper, repeating a chant I didn't understand, but I felt every word digging into my skin like splinters. And standing behind her was Roderick Dern. No longer the polished grief counselor with a sympathetic voice. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tight over his face. His eyes were empty pits of black. His fingers were too long, each tipped with a nail that looked more like glass than bone. He smiled when he saw me, and that smile never reached his eyes. "You're too late, Bernardo," he said calmly, his voice echoing in the room though his lips barely moved. "She's almost opened it." I stepped forward, my hand trembling. "What is this? You said she'd see our mother." "I did." His grin widened. "I just never said what would be wearing her face." A loud creak came from the floor below us. Then another. The whole house was trembling like it was alive and in pain. The air around Isolde shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. Her hair floated around her head as if she were underwater. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she kept whispering the chant over and over. I lunged toward her. Rodri flicked his hand. I felt something slam into my chest and was thrown back against the wall. My skull cracked against the wood. Dazed, I watched him move to stand beside her, a shadow spreading beneath his feet like spilled ink. "You don't understand grief, Bernardo," he said. "But she does. She wants to see your mother again. She wants to hear her voice. That desire is an open door." I struggled to get up. "You're using her." "I'm freeing her," he whispered. Suddenly, a wind howled through the house, even though every window was closed. The candles bent sideways, their flames stretching toward the ceiling. A deep, hollow sound echoed through the room, like a door creaking open in the middle of a cave. Then I saw it. A crack appeared in the center of the ritual circle, glowing with a dull red light. From it, a dark smoke began to rise, curling upward like fingers reaching for the sky. Faces moved within the smoke, faces of people I didn't recognize, all of them screaming silently. Isolde gasped. Her body jerked. Her eyes flew open, and they were glowing white. Isolde! I screamed. She turned to look at me, but it wasn't her. Not really. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't belong to my sister. Then I heard my mother's voice. Bernardo, my sweet boy. It came from the smoke. Soft. Familiar. But wrong. It was the tone she used when I was 5 and sick in bed. The same words. The same rhythm. But they came from nowhere. From everywhere. My heart cracked. No, I whispered. You're not her. Rodri turned his head toward me. Who are you to decide what's real and what isn't? You refused to mourn. She embraced it. Now one of you gets what they want. The crack in the floor widened. The light grew. The shadows on the walls started dancing, flickering like flames. A low, guttural growl came from the opening. And something was coming through. I could see its shape, tall, thin, moving like smoke and bone. It had too many arms and a face that changed every time I blinked. But one thing stayed the same. It had my mother's voice. Come closer, my son. I screamed. Not out of fear, but fury. I forced myself to my feet and grabbed the nearest object I could find, a heavy candlestick. I didn't care about the symbols or the warnings anymore. I charged at the circle. Rodri hissed like a snake, turning toward me with both arms outstretched. The shadows around him snapped forward, like whips made of smoke. But I was already inside the circle. I tackled Isolde. The moment I touched her, the light flared, and everything shattered. The candles exploded. The smoke was sucked backward like a breath being taken in reverse. Rodri screamed, not with pain but rage. The shadows clung to him like chains, pulling him down into the crack in the floor. The last thing I saw before the light went out was Isolde's face returning to normal. And Rodri, reaching up with one last smile. I'll see you again when the veil is thin. Then he was gone, and the house fell silent. I knew something was wrong the moment the air changed. It wasn't cold like before, not the kind of chill that slips through the cracks of an old house. This was heavier, thicker, like the house was breathing through my skin. Every board beneath my feet groaned with a low moan, and the walls seemed to shudder, as if something was crawling just behind them. I rushed down the stairs, skipping steps, heart pounding in my throat. The cellar door was open. Isolde had already gone down. I called her name, but my voice didn't echo. It just disappeared, like the basement had swallowed it whole. The candlelight below flickered against the stone walls. I could smell the salt, the iron, and something else, burned flowers and rotting meat. My fingers trembled as I grabbed the railing and descended. With each step, it felt like I was going deeper than the basement should go. The stone room was lit with a dozen candles arranged in a perfect circle, the air thick with incense and smoke. Isolde stood in the center. She wore Mom's old scarf around her shoulders, and her eyes, they didn't look like hers anymore. They were glassy, wide, staring straight ahead at the far wall. A door stood there. But that didn't make sense. There had never been a door in this basement. It was just stone down here. Always had been. Yet now one stood at the far end. Old. Rotten. Black veins pulsing along the wood. And it was breathing. In and out. Like it was alive. Roderick Dern stood beside it, hands folded, smiling softly like a priest before a baptism. She's almost here, he whispered. Isolde didn't move. Her lips were moving silently, repeating words I couldn't understand. Words from that cursed book. The same one he gave her. I stepped forward. Isolde, don't. You don't know what's behind that door. She does, Rodri answered for her. It's your mother. She's waiting. No, I said. That thing isn't our mother. That's something else. Something using her voice. Rodri turned to me slowly. His eyes weren't human anymore. They flickered like candle flames, yellow and hungry. You opened this, Bernardo. When you refused to grieve. When you left her alone in her pain. I stepped toward him. You fed her lies. You led her here. I only gave her what she wanted most, he said. A way back. Love always leads to the door. It's the hand that turns the handle. A deep creak echoed through the room. The door began to open. From the crack oozed a thick black mist, coiling and writhing like smoke from a dying fire. A voice whispered through the gap. Bernardo. It was Mom's voice. Soft. Tired. Calling me like she used to when I was a boy. But there was something wrong about it. A second voice behind it, low, distorted, dragging like chains over stone. Isolde took a step forward. I ran to her and grabbed her shoulders. No, that's not her. That thing is just wearing her voice. She looked up at me. Her lips trembled. She said she misses us. Isolde, that door doesn't lead to Mom. It leads to something else. Something that wants in. The floor shook beneath us. From the doorway, a figure began to emerge. At first, it looked like Mom. Her hair, her robe, even the way she tilted her head. But then it stretched. Her arms grew longer, fingers bending backward. Her face twisted, peeling into a grin too wide, too sharp. Eyes like black holes blinked open all across her skin. Rodri knelt beside it. Welcome, he breathed. The thing stepped out, leaving behind a trail of soot and ash. Its voice split into many, some crying, some screaming, some laughing like children. Isolde fell to her knees, clutching her ears. I turned to the door. It was still open, and more shadows were stirring on the other side. I grabbed the candle nearest me and threw it at the symbols drawn in salt on the ground. The fire jumped and licked across the lines, breaking the circle. The creature hissed. Rodri snarled and turned toward me. His smile was gone. His true face was showing now, half bone, half smoke. His hands were claws, his legs twisted backward like some forgotten beast. You fool, he growled. You opened it. You can't close it now. I looked down at my sister. Her eyes were wide with horror. She understood now. She saw it too. The wrong door had been opened. And something had stepped through. The air was thick, like it had weight. Breathing felt like swallowing smoke. The basement trembled around me, groaning like the bones of a beast waking from sleep. My sister stood at the center of the old stone floor, her hands outstretched, her face lit by the flickering flame of a black candle. Her eyes had gone glassy, locked on the swirling shape that oozed out of the cracked basement wall like oil flowing from a wound in the world. It wasn't our mother. It wore her voice, but it wasn't her. Bernardo. It cooed in that soft, broken tone I remembered from when Mom used to hum lullabies by the window. She opened the door for me. Aren't you happy? You're not alone anymore. I couldn't speak. I was frozen, my body shaking. My feet were numb. Everything in me wanted to run, but I couldn't leave Isolde. She turned to me slowly. Her lips were trembling. There were tears in her eyes, but something else too, resignation. I thought it would be her, she whispered, almost apologizing. I just wanted to see her one last time. I didn't mean to. The creature, the thing wearing my mother's voice, twisted its head in a way no human could. It smiled with too many teeth. Behind it, the doorway pulsed. Not a door in the wood or wall, but in the air itself. A vertical tear, leaking shadows that didn't belong in our world. Whispers curled out from it like smoke, each one saying something terrible in a language I didn't understand, but my soul did. My soul understood all of it. Rodri stood beside it now, his face no longer pretending. His skin was ashen and stretched too tight, and his eyes were like mirrors reflecting fire. He didn't need the mask of a counselor anymore. You brought this on yourself, Bernardo, he said calmly. Your sister simply had the courage to knock. And now the door is open. Permanently. No, I said. It came out weak, but I found my voice again. There has to be a way to shut it. Rodri smiled, cruel and slow. One of you. A blood offering. A life tied to the binding spell. You broke it open with her grief. Only a sacrifice will seal it shut. I looked at Isolde. She looked back at me. I could see the answer already forming in her eyes. She was still my little sister. Still that girl who used to follow me around holding onto my sleeve, scared of the dark. She took a step toward me. Her hands were trembling. I opened it, she said. It's my fault. Let me fix it. No, I whispered. Don't. Don't you dare. Her face softened. You always protected me, Bernie. You gave up your life to come back. Let me do this one thing. Before I could stop her, she turned and stepped into the circle carved into the floor, the very one Rodri had helped her draw. The ritual knife, ancient and black as coal, sat at the edge of the circle. I lunged forward, but something unseen slammed me to the ground. I couldn't move, could only watch. She picked up the knife. Don't! I screamed. We'll find another way. She looked at me one last time, and then smiled. Not in fear. In peace. I saw her, you know, she said. Right before the door opened. Just for a moment. She was smiling too. And then she plunged the blade into her own chest. Time fractured. The shadows recoiled, shrieking like 1,000 voices crying out at once. The door cracked with a thunderous snap and began folding inward, devouring the light, the whispers, the creature. Rodri screamed, not in pain but in rage. His form twisted, stretched, then snapped like torn fabric into the void. The veil slammed shut with a sound like a heartbeat stopping. Silence. The basement was still. The candle had gone out. Isolde's body was gone. Only her necklace remained, lying on the stone floor, covered in a single drop of blood that refused to dry. I dropped to my knees, touching the stone where she stood. Still warm. Still hers. I wept. Not because I lost her, but because she never should have had to make that choice. And yet, she did. She saved me. She saved everyone. But even now, long after I left Verlith Hollow, even now, in my small apartment hundreds of miles away, I still wake up, always at 2:59 a.m. And from somewhere inside the walls, I hear a knock. Soft. Gentle. Like someone asking to come back in. I don't remember how I made it up the stairs. My legs moved, but they didn't feel like mine. My shirt was soaked in sweat and Isolde's blood. The house groaned behind me, but quieter now. Almost like it had taken a long breath, and was finally holding it. The basement door slammed shut on its own the moment I stepped out. The air in the hallway was still, but charged, like the seconds after lightning, when you wait for the thunder. I waited. Nothing came. I turned back, hand on the basement door's knob, but I couldn't open it again. It was sealed. Not locked, sealed. Like the wood had melted into the frame. I leaned against it and whispered her name. Isolde. Nothing. I should have screamed. I should have cursed the heavens, or tore down that cursed house with my bare hands. But I couldn't. My body was frozen, not with fear, but with a cold emptiness. I just stood there, forehead against the door, breathing in the dust and the old paint, hoping, foolishly, that maybe she'd whisper back. But she never did. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't told anyone what happened. What would I even say? My sister opened a door to hell and offered her life to close it. They'd wrap me in white and lock me away. So I told them what I had to. Isolde went missing. Authorities blamed it on her mental health. Maybe she wandered into the woods. Maybe she ran away. No body was ever found. The townspeople offered sad smiles. A few whispered prayers. Verlith Hollow moved on. I didn't. I packed a small bag, left the estate, and never looked back. I sold the house online, dirt cheap. Some real estate company scooped it up, probably hoping to turn it into a haunted attraction or some gothic Airbnb. Let them. Let someone else deal with the rot in the walls, the shadows in the corners. I've moved to a small apartment in the city now. 1 bedroom. Bright walls. No creaking floors. No basement. But the silence here, it's different. Not comforting. Not peaceful. It's empty. And at exactly 2:59 a.m. every night, I wake up. Not because of a nightmare. Not because of any sound. But because I feel something. A shift. A tug in the air. The clocks in my apartment all reset to 2:59 a.m. on their own. I've replaced them. Broken them. Smashed them to pieces. Doesn't matter. Every night they tick back. And then, there's the knock. 3 soft knocks. Not from the door. Not from the window. From inside the walls. Right behind my bed. I don't answer. I don't speak. I just lie there with my eyes wide open, heartbeat loud in my ears, praying it will pass. But some nights, I think I hear a voice. Faint. Far away. Bernardo. It sounds like her. But I know better now. That isn't my sister. That door was closed. But something on the other side remembers me. And it's still knocking.